into it?
At the practical level, for those of us who are exposed to a wide diversity of religious, philosophical, and spiritual traditions, and sometimes we naturally gravitate to one as opposed to or instead of the other. And we also see in terms of the secular an attempt to take little bits from different traditions, through a brand of spiritual tourism where you collect artifacts and bits and pieces of practice. Surely there is a value, and you mentioned that these are traditions that have survived thousands of years, and that is the demonstration, more than anything else, that it works, and there is a value to it. So, in today's era, how dynamic, how necessary is it for spiritual traditions to evolve, to meet the current predicaments and needs of aspirants without diluting the core, so that they can respond to contemporary issues that come up? And traditions such as that you so beautifully articulated, and the more metaphysical aspects of Vedanta, of course, rise above it. And so you go into a much larger metaphysical realm. But for us to access that, the points of entry are still pretty mundane. And so how do we navigate that journey?
It's a very, very cardinal question. When Jawaharlal Nehru was still alive, he was the Prime Minister of India, the Indian government decided they wanted to change Muslim personal law in India, not Hindu personal, Muslim personal law. And they faked a very big conference, international conference, major scholars all over, all of whom came to confirm that it would be all right to change Islamic personal law. And unfortunately for India, they also invited me. And I did the whole thing, and that's where Nehru had his heart attack. He was sitting right there in the front row.
Really?
And Mr. Indira Gandhi took him out and died a few months later. Not that I caused his death, God forbid. But what I said at that conference was that if we have to change with the times, what do the times have to change with? The notion that we have to change the religions of the world in order to conform to the so-called realities of everyday life or our times forgets the fact that upon what principles should society itself change? What determines the times? This is one of the greatest errors of the modern world from the point of view of someone like myself who's a traditionalist. We reject all the errors of modernism, going back to the Renaissance. The promise of rationalism over intellectual understanding of reality, individualism over the universal, and so many other things about which all the traditional writers have written. We believe that the great religions of the world are a gift from heaven. And the world is to be made in conformity with them, not they with the world. Having said that, however, that is, square is always square. You cannot reform a square. A square cannot evolve into a better square. That's absurd. Much of modern thinking is pure absurdity, pure sophistry. But putting that aside, the fact that God has willed that these religions are still around, and God has also willed to have a humanity that we have before our day today. Either those religions are no longer relevant to this humanity, or they're relevant, but this humanity doesn't need religion and it's going to do something else, it's going to disappear, it's going to die out. You have several possibilities. One is that we're at the end of the world, which is, of course, a very strong possibility that Hindus, Muslims, Christians, many, according to their own scriptures, believe that we're not far away from that. I don't want to get into eschatological discussions now. But one is that, therefore, the people don't follow religion, as all the religions themselves predicted. It's the book of John, the end of the Quran, and Hadith, and so forth and so on. Of course, all these Hindu texts of the 3rd century, the Puranas, and you know much better than I do. The second possibility is that as long as these religions are alive, God wants to keep them alive. And therefore, they must have the efficacy, because God's mercy will not allow humanity to exist without any path of salvation, but still have the efficacy for those human beings who live at the present moment. And I believe that all the great spiritual paths are given by God this creative plasticity to be able to apply themselves to no matter what time, no matter what place. You can practice Sufism right here in Louisville, as you can in Mecca. In fact, is the most difficult place to try practice because of these heathens who are ruling over there. But I won't get into that discussion. But I cannot avoid saying something like that. When there a 100-story building next to the house of God, what can one say? But any other Islamic city, you can practice Sufism anywhere, not by diluting it, but by applying it to the particular human condition in which we find ourselves. In the old days, it would take you about 2 hours to go with your donkey from your house to the bazaar or place of work or the mosque. You had 2 hours to pray on the way. Now you're stuck in 495 traffic around Washington, where you have to curse the devil and so on and so to get out of it. It's very hard to control your anger. So obviously, it still takes 2 hours, of course. The speed has not improved, but you're in a state of anger and frustration all the time. So you need other spiritual means. You're not relaxed as you were going slowly on your donkey or horseback in some Indian or Persian city. So the conditions, yes, have changed. But as far as I know, the great traditions that have kept alive, not only Sufism and Islam, certain path of Hinduism, Buddhism, even Hesychast Christianity. In the Western Christian tradition, most of the spiritual path died out. Merton was trying to revive it in Catholicism, of course. Not completely died out, very difficult. In all of these traditions, it is possible to apply it. I'm not hopeless, and I tell this to you from experience. A person who's not only a scholar of these fields, I have something to do with them, immersed in it, and I've seen it practiced by people as different as children of divorcees from San Francisco to the son of ulama in Cairo and everything in between. And that can happen, and I'm sure it's true of other traditions. The fact that he's sitting here is itself that he is not born into the Hindu caste system. He is a Westerner. He's entered into the Hindu spiritual world. This would not have been done 1,000 years ago. Hinduism would not have permitted it. It's a kind of divine compensation. And that brings with it tremendous danger, because it brings with it the possibility of caricatures, distortions, false gurus, false eclecticisms, which are one of the great problems of our world today, in which, as you say, you take a little bit here, a little bit here. You're making yourself ultimately the God or the prophet. Without saying so, that so-called guru is now the prophet, because he's decided to choose this part of Hinduism, this part of Islam, this part of Christianity. And that, I think, is total nonsense, very dangerous, demonic. It's a satanic thing, more than something satanic, because if, as Ananda Kumaraswamy said, all paths lead to the same summit. You cannot jump from one path for 2 feet and then go to the other path and jump back again. You'll never get to the summit. And most likely you'll fall down and break your neck in between. So we're in a world in which there's a tremendous danger of pseudo-spirituality. It's now echoed back into the Oriental world. It first echoed back into Japan, which was the most modernized Oriental society after the Second World War. We began to get pseudo-Zen. You had Zen, anti-Zen, pseudo-Zen. Then it came in your country, in India. All these pseudo-gurus and so on began to appear. Now it's appearing in the Islamic world. In the Islamic Republic of Iran, they're now fake Sufis. California Sufis have migrated to Tehran, if I can use such an expression. So we live in really very, very difficult times. You're right, you put your finger on a very important issue.